The restaurant was known for its beauty. Soft lights hung from the ceiling. Glass walls showed the city outside, glowing with life. People came here to relax, celebrate, and feel important. On this night, the room was full, but something felt tense, like the air was heavy. A man walked in wearing a perfectly pressed suit. Everything about him showed control and power. His watch was expensive, his posture straight, his eyes sharp. He had traveled a long way and carried the weight of many decisions on his shoulders. This day had not gone the way he planned. A business meeting earlier had failed. Trust had been broken. His patience was already thin. The manager rushed to greet him, forcing a smile. He had been warned that this guest was not in a good mood. The man nodded once and followed to a table near the window. He did not look around. He did not admire the view. He simply sat down and placed his phone on the table, face down, as if he did not want to see the world for a moment. Around him, other diners whispered. Some recognized him. Some only felt his presence. Wealth has a way of changing the mood of a room. The staff moved more carefully now. A small mistake could turn into a disaster. A young waitress stood near the service area, holding a tray with shaking hands. She had just started her shift. Her uniform was clean but worn from many long days. She watched the manager point toward the powerful guest table. Her stomach tightened. She had been serving tables nonstop all evening and was already tired. Still, she nodded and walked forward. She approached the table with a polite smile. Her voice was soft when she asked if he was ready to order. The man barely looked up. He answered shortly, his accent thick, his tone cold. She tried to repeat his order to be sure, but she mispronounced one word. It was a small thing. Normally, no one would care, but tonight it mattered. He corrected her sharply, not yelling, but firm enough to cut. She apologized quickly and wrote it down again. As she turned to leave, he added something about the service being slow already. She nodded again, though it had only been minutes. From that moment, everything felt wrong. The kitchen took longer than expected. A dish was missing a side. The water glass stayed empty for too long. Each time the waitress returned to the table, the man's irritation grew. His jaw tightened. His fingers tapped against the table. He said little, but his silence felt loud. Inside his mind, his thoughts were racing. He was tired of pretending, tired of being polite in places where respect felt forced. In his world, time was money. Mistakes had costs. And today, he felt surrounded by mistakes. The waitress could feel it too. She sensed his anger growing like a storm. She tried harder, moving faster, checking again and again. Still, nothing seemed enough. Every glance from him felt like judgment. Her hands trembled as she cleared his plate. Nearby tables had started to notice. Conversation slowed. A couple glanced over, then quickly looked away. No one wanted to be close to a moment like this. When she brought the main dish, the man took one bite and stopped. He placed his fork down slowly. He looked up at her for the first time directly. His eyes were dark and tired, not cruel, but heavy. "This is not what I asked for," he said. She looked at the plate, confused. It was exactly what the kitchen had prepared. She tried to explain, but her words came out rushed. Her English slipped for a second, and she corrected herself. Her face grew warm. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. That was it, the final push. "Enough," he said quietly. He waved his hand toward the table. "Bring the bill." The words hit her harder than she expected, not because of money, because of the way he said it. Final, closed, like a door being shut. She nodded and turned away. As she walked to the counter, her chest felt tight. She told herself not to cry. She had dealt with angry customers before. This was nothing new. Still, something about this man felt different. His anger felt deeper, like it came from somewhere far away. The manager noticed and hurried over the table with apologies ready. The man did not listen. He checked his watch and stood up. Chairs scraped slightly against the floor. A few people nearby froze, pretending not to stare. As he waited for the bill, he muttered something under his breath. His voice was low, almost tired. He did not mean for anyone to hear. It was not an insult. It was not loud. It was in Arabic. The waitress stopped mid-step. Her heart skipped. The words hit her like a memory she had buried. She knew that language, not just the words, but the feeling behind them, the pain, the frustration, the loneliness hidden inside a single sentence. She stood there for a moment too long. The manager called her name, but she barely heard it. Her mind traveled back to another place, another time. Sounds of a different world filled her head. She shook herself and forced her feet to move. She placed the bill on the table with both hands. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper. The man reached for it without looking at her. He was ready to leave, ready to forget this place and everyone in it. She hesitated. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her heart pounded. Speaking now could change everything, or ruin it. She told herself it was not her place. She was just a waitress. This was just a customer. Still, the words he'd spoken echoed in her chest. The restaurant felt silent, even though it was full. She took a breath, and just as he turned slightly toward the door, she made a decision that would change the rest of the night. She took a deep breath and spoke softly. The words were in Arabic, clear and precise. The moment they left her mouth, the restaurant seemed to pause. Cutlery clinked somewhere, a glass tinkled, but nothing sounded loud. Every eye was on the table, even though no one fully understood why. The man froze mid-step. His hand stopped on the door handle. Slowly, he turned around, his dark eyes locking on hers. Surprise crossed his face. Shock, even. No one had spoken to him in his own language in this country. No one had looked at him and understood the weight behind his words. She waited, unsure she should have spoken at all. Her heart was pounding, but she tried to remain calm. She knew she could not back down now. The words had already been spoken. There was no taking them back. She had addressed him respectfully, acknowledging not just the man in front of her, but the life he carried behind him. He sat down slowly, as if the simple act of speaking Arabic had given him a moment to breathe. The anger that had been so strong moments ago softened slightly. His shoulders relaxed, though his eyes still carried that tired intensity. He watched her, trying to understand how she could know his language. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was filled with curiosity and an unspoken question. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. He asked her how she knew Arabic. The words were carefully measured. He was no longer angry. He was cautious, intrigued. She explained briefly. Her family had lived in the Middle East for years. She had grown up speaking Arabic at home, though life had forced her away from her roots. She did not offer details beyond that, only enough to answer his question. He nodded slowly, processing her words. His lips pressed together, a sign of respect rather than impatience. He had expected a foreign country to misunderstand him, to see him as just another wealthy stranger. But this young woman, a waitress who had every reason to avoid engaging deeply with him, had spoken his language. She had acknowledged not just his voice, but his history, even in a small way. The manager, standing a few steps away, was unsure what to do. He had never seen this guest like this. He watched quietly, giving them space. The other staff and diners kept their distance. Something unusual was happening, something beyond money, food, or service. Something human. The man asked another question, softer this time. He wanted to know why she had chosen to speak Arabic. She looked at him honestly. She said she had heard his words, and they had sounded tired, lonely, frustrated. Speaking to him in a language that carried history and comfort felt natural. She had not wanted to embarrass him or cause a scene. She had only wanted to acknowledge him. He seemed taken aback by her honesty. There was no flattery, no fear, no hidden motives, just simple truth. He leaned back in his chair, letting out a long sigh. His eyes softened for the first time since he had entered the restaurant. The tension in the room shifted again, this time toward curiosity mixed with relief. The people around them could feel the change, even if they did not understand the words being spoken. She noticed that his hands, which had been tightly clenched on the table moments ago, now rested loosely. She realized that this was not just a wealthy man frustrated with poor service. This was someone carrying invisible burdens. Someone who had fought through life, who had been betrayed, who had built a world from his own hard work, and who rarely allowed anyone close. He spoke a little about his day, still in Arabic, and she listened without interrupting. There was no judgment, no hurry. She nodded when appropriate, offering small words of acknowledgement. He seemed surprised that someone could just listen, not try to impress or sell something, not ask for anything in return. The simplicity of it seemed to touch him. The diners around began to relax slowly. Some tried to watch discreetly, curious about the unusual calm between the two. The staff regained their composure, understanding that this was no ordinary situation. The young waitress felt a strange mix of fear and pride. She had never expected that speaking her language would create such an effect. She realized she had done something important, even if it was just acknowledging another person's existence with respect. The man asked her about her life, gently, with a quiet curiosity that seemed foreign to him. She spoke about her family, her work, and her dreams. She kept her story simple, honest, and true. There were moments of hesitation, where she almost faltered, thinking she might have shared too much. But he encouraged her with small gestures, a nod, a soft smile, a look that said he understood. He shared pieces of his own life as well. Not the parts about wealth or success, but the parts about struggles, losses, and moments when he felt alone. For the first time, he spoke openly to a stranger. She listened without judgment, acknowledging each story with quiet respect. He seemed relieved to share, as if speaking aloud helped lighten some of the burden he carried. The conversation lasted longer than either expected. Time passed unnoticed. The restaurant continued to hum with life around them, but at that table, it felt like a private world. The waiters and other guests adapted to the new atmosphere, sensing that something unique was unfolding. The young waitress felt her confidence grow. She realized that simple acts, speaking in someone's language, showing understanding, could have a profound effect. She had entered the evening expecting a difficult shift and left with a moment that changed her perspective. She had seen the power of human connection in its purest form, without wealth, without status, just understanding. The man's anger from earlier seemed like a distant memory. His presence was still strong, but the tension had shifted to calm. He leaned back, spoke in a quieter tone, and occasionally smiled. There was a softness now, a recognition that even in a foreign country, human kindness could reach him. The manager, watching from a distance, realized that nothing could have been planned for this moment. No training, no protocol could have predicted what happened. He simply observed, respecting the interaction, understanding that this was beyond service and business. This was about humanity. The waitress knew the moment was fragile. One wrong word or gesture could break it. She stayed calm, attentive, and respectful. Her heart still raced, but she learned to focus on listening rather than worrying about mistakes. The man's stories continued, his voice calm, reflecting his past struggles and present thoughts. Through the conversation, she discovered the man's humanity, the moments when he had been vulnerable, the times he had been disappointed, and the rare moments when he had felt understood. She realized that even people with immense wealth and power could feel pain, loneliness, and longing just like anyone else. The connection between them grew quietly. No grand gestures, no dramatic speeches, just words, sincere and heartfelt, bridging the gap between two lives from very different worlds. They both recognized that this encounter was unexpected but meaningful. It was a reminder that empathy could exist in the most surprising places. As the evening continued, the young waitress learned that her actions had consequences beyond her shift. She had given someone a moment of relief, a chance to feel seen, and in return, she felt empowered. She understood that courage sometimes came in small forms. Speaking a word, making a gesture, showing respect. These simple actions could change the course of a life. The man, meanwhile, felt a sense of calm he had not experienced in months. His anger was gone, replaced by a quiet reflection. He realized that wealth could not provide the comfort he felt in this moment. Only connection, understanding, and respect could bring that peace. For the first time that night, he smiled genuinely, not for anyone else, but for the feeling that someone truly understood him. The waitress kept her attention on him, sensing that the story was not over. She knew the evening would leave a mark on both of them. She had learned that understanding and kindness could bridge worlds. And the man had learned that even in a foreign country, human connection could reach him in ways money never could. Neither of them knew what the night would bring next, but both were changed. A single decision to speak, a simple acknowledgement of language and respect, had transformed the atmosphere entirely. They had crossed a threshold from tension and frustration to calm and understanding. And in the quiet moments that followed, they both realized that this encounter, brief as it was, could influence the rest of their lives in ways neither could predict. The man looked at her, his dark eyes searching. There was something in the way she had spoken that he could not forget. It was not just a language, but the respect, the understanding, the unspoken empathy behind her words. It was rare to find someone who could speak to him in this way, someone who did not fear him or try to impress him. He took a deep breath, letting the tension of the day flow out slowly. His shoulders relaxed further. The anger that had been building since the failed meeting and the rough service melted into something quieter. It was as if the simple act of hearing his own language in a foreign place had reminded him that he was still human, still capable of connection. She noticed a change. She saw the small shift in his expression, the way his posture softened. She felt relief as well, but also curiosity. Who was this man behind the powerful image? What life had shaped him to be both respected and feared in the world, yet so alone in his personal moments? He asked her another question, softly, almost hesitantly. He wanted to know more about her, not in a pushy or commanding way, but with genuine interest. She told him a little about herself, her family, her childhood, the struggles she had faced to reach this point. She spoke honestly, without exaggeration, without fear of judgment. Her words were simple, but they carried sincerity. He listened carefully, nodding occasionally, asking small questions that showed he was truly paying attention. Each question was thoughtful, not intrusive. He seemed to value her perspective, as if her words carried weight beyond their immediate meaning. There was a quiet respect between them that was unusual in his life, where people often saw him only for his wealth or power. The restaurant around them continued its usual rhythm, but their table felt separate, almost like a private world. The other diners and staff sensed it too. The ordinary sounds of service faded into the background, as if acknowledging that something special was unfolding. It was a simple, quiet connection that had grown from a single decision to speak and be heard. He began to share fragments of his own life, not the parts that the public knew, his businesses, deals, or wealth, but the personal parts. He spoke about moments of doubt, times when he felt isolated, instances of betrayal by people he had trusted. Each word seemed measured, deliberate, revealing a side of him that few had ever seen. His voice, though low, carried emotion that surprised even him. The waitress listened with careful attention, letting him speak without interruption. She asked gentle questions when appropriate, showing that she understood the nuance of his experiences. Her responses were respectful and empathetic, not judgmental. In that simple exchange, a powerful bond began to form. He realized that in her presence, he could speak openly without fear. He did not have to maintain the armor of power or the mask of confidence. He could simply be a man, tired from life, in need of understanding. Her willingness to listen without pretense created a safe space that was rare in his world. As he spoke, he occasionally glanced at the restaurant around him, perhaps reminding himself that they were not completely alone. He smiled faintly at small moments, like a server bringing a dish or a couple laughing quietly. But his attention always returned to her, to the conversation that was unfolding. There was a quiet intensity to their interaction, a sense that every word mattered. The waitress began to understand the depth of his experiences. She realized that his anger earlier had not been about the food or the service. It had been a reflection of his stress, his isolation, and the weight of his responsibilities. Her simple acknowledgement of his language and culture had opened a door for him to release some of that burden. She spoke about moments from her own life, sharing small stories of resilience and hope. She told him about challenges she had faced, times when she felt alone, and how she had managed to keep going despite difficulties. Her words were grounded in reality, simple yet powerful, showing him that courage and perseverance existed in many forms. He responded with quiet admiration. He seemed impressed not by her accomplishments, but by her attitude, her ability to maintain dignity and kindness despite obstacles. It reminded him that strength did not always show in grand gestures or wealth. It often appeared quietly, in the way people treated others and carried themselves. As the conversation continued, A subtle change occurred in his demeanor. The tightness in his jaw disappeared. His hands relaxed, and his gaze became less sharp. The burden he had carried for so long seemed lighter. He leaned back in his chair, occasionally letting out a slow breath, as if exhaling the weight of unseen pressures. The waitress noticed small gestures, a faint smile, a nod, a soft laugh. Each one told her that he was feeling something he had not expected to feel tonight. Comfort. In a strange city, surrounded by strangers, he had found someone who listened, who understood, who treated him as a human being rather than a title or status. Other diners began to glance subtly, sensing a shift in energy at the table. The staff moved carefully, making sure not to interrupt. Even the manager, standing nearby, realized that the interaction was beyond ordinary service. It was a moment of genuine human connection, rare and precious. The man asked about her thoughts, seeking perspective on simple matters, and she answered honestly. He seemed to value her opinions, asking follow-up questions, curious about her reasoning. Their exchange was natural, flowing, and respectful. There were no power plays, no pretensions, just two people communicating openly. He shared more from his life, stories of successes, failures, and lessons learned. She listened without envy, judgment, or condescension. Her responses were grounded in empathy, acknowledging the challenges he had faced. The balance between speaking and listening created a rhythm that was comfortable for both, strengthening connection. Time passed unnoticed. The room continued its usual pace, but their table was separate, almost timeless. Words were exchanged, feelings shared, and both began to realize that this evening would remain in their memories for a long time. The impact of speaking and being heard, of understanding and being understood, was profound. He reflected silently for moments, looking at the city lights through the glass walls. She observed him, recognizing that wealth and status could not provide the simple human connection he was experiencing now. Her presence and understanding offered him something money could never buy: genuine empathy and respect. She felt a sense of satisfaction, not from praise, but from knowing that her actions had a meaningful effect. Speaking her language, listening with care, acknowledging his humanity, these small things had shifted the entire dynamic. She had learned the power of connection, the importance of being present, and the impact of empathy. He looked at her again, this time with a quiet smile. The recognition in his eyes said more than words could express. He understood that this encounter, brief though it was, had touched him deeply. He had found a rare moment of honesty and understanding, a pause from the complexities and expectations of his world. The waitress realized that the conversation was building towards something more. It was not finished, yet it had already changed both of them. Each word, each gesture, had brought them closer to a mutual understanding. They had crossed a threshold from tension and anger to calm and empathy, and the night was still unfolding. As they continued talking, she understood that small actions could carry immense significance. She had spoken in his language, acknowledged his experiences, and treated him with respect. In return, he had allowed himself to be vulnerable, to open up, and to share parts of himself he rarely revealed. The atmosphere at the table remained intimate, private, and powerful. Neither could predict what would happen next, but both knew that this encounter would leave a lasting impression. The simple act of understanding, of being present and listening, had created a bond neither could ignore. He leaned back, looked at her, and spoke again. His voice was steady, calm, but carried a weight of emotion. She listened, fully attentive, recognizing that his words held significance beyond the surface. She responded thoughtfully, carefully choosing her words to maintain the delicate balance they had established. Through the evening, they shared stories, emotions, and reflections. Each story revealed more about their humanity, their experiences, and the quiet strength within them. The room around them existed, but it was secondary. The focus was entirely on the connection that had formed between them, a connection rooted in respect, understanding, and shared humanity. By the end of the evening, both had discovered something unexpected. She had gained confidence, a deeper understanding of human interaction, and a sense of empowerment from the impact of her actions. He had found comfort, empathy, and a rare opportunity to be heard without judgment or expectation. Neither knew how this encounter would influence their futures, but both felt the significance of the moment. A single decision to speak, to acknowledge, to listen, had transformed what began as tension and frustration into calm, understanding, and mutual respect. It was a reminder that even in unexpected places, human connection could emerge and leave a lasting mark. The conversation between them deepened as the evening went on. The restaurant's soft lights reflected in the glass walls, creating a calm atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the tension earlier. The man leaned back in his chair, relaxed yet thoughtful. He had begun to share things he rarely said aloud, moments from his past, struggles that shaped him, and decisions that haunted him. Each word carried a weight that the young waitress felt immediately. She listened carefully, maintaining eye contact and offering small nods. She knew the importance of truly hearing someone, not just waiting for a moment to speak. There was no pretense in her attention. It was simple, human, and sincere. She realized that this man, powerful as he was searching for understanding, something he could not find in wealth or business. He told her about his childhood, growing up in a world that demanded perfection. Mistakes were costly and trust was rare. He had learned to carry burdens silently, to appear strong even when he felt broken inside. Success had come, but it had not healed the loneliness that followed him everywhere. Speaking in Arabic with someone who truly understood him offered relief he had not expected. The waitress shared small fragments of her own story. She told him about her family, about sacrifices made quietly, about days when she felt invisible despite her efforts. She did not dwell on hardship. She focused on resilience and hope. Her words were simple, yet powerful in their honesty. He listened, sometimes silently, sometimes asking questions that showed genuine curiosity. They began to notice small similarities in their experiences, despite the different worlds they came from. Both had faced pressure, isolation, and the weight of responsibility. Both had learned to endure, to survive, and to navigate life with quiet strength. This shared understanding created an unspoken bond. They were strangers in many ways, yet connected in human experience. The man paused and looked out the window. The city lights stretched endlessly, but he was not thinking about the view. His mind traced memories, mistakes, and lessons. He admitted softly, almost to himself, that he had never spoken to anyone like this before. Not with such honesty, not without judgment, not without an agenda. The young waitress was listening, and that was enough. She did not need to fix anything or impress him. She simply existed as a witness to his truth. He glanced back at her, eyes softer now. He asked her opinion on matters that were not simple. He wanted her thoughts on decisions, not business strategies, but life choices and values. Her answers were honest and grounded. She did not pretend to know everything. She admitted uncertainty when necessary, yet spoke with confidence when she could. He seemed to value this honesty more than any advice he had received from others. The waitress noticed subtle changes in his demeanor. He leaned forward slightly when engaged, relaxed when understanding something, and sometimes smiled faintly at the simplicity of her perspective. It was a small but significant transformation. The anger that had dominated the room earlier was gone, replaced by a quiet curiosity and openness. He spoke about times when he had felt completely alone. She listened with empathy, recognizing the vulnerability he displayed. Her responses acknowledged his feelings without judgment, providing a rare safe space for him. It was a connection neither had expected, yet both were grateful for. The atmosphere at the table had changed completely. Nearby diners had begun to notice, though they did not fully understand. They saw a wealthy man speaking calmly to a young waitress, listening, laughing softly, and occasionally leaning in to hear better. There was no arrogance, no superiority. Only two humans communicating sincerely. He shared stories of people he had trusted and been betrayed by. Her expressions reflected understanding rather than judgment. He realized that his experiences had been shaped by the choices of others, but his growth and resilience were his own. Speaking about it to someone outside his world, someone unaffected by his wealth, offered relief he did not know he needed. The waitress continued to engage, asking questions that encouraged him to reflect. She did not push, but her curiosity showed that she valued his experiences and insights. Each question, carefully framed, allowed him to explore emotions and memories that had been buried under years of responsibility and power. At some point, he paused and smiled faintly, a genuine smile that did not hide anything. It was a rare expression, reserved for moments of honesty and relief. She realized then that the simple act of speaking and listening in a shared language had opened doors he had long kept closed. Trust had begun to form, slowly but surely. The conversation eventually shifted toward lighter topics. Childhood memories, favorite places, small joys that had persisted despite challenges. Laughter occasionally broke the calm, and the atmosphere became warm and human. The contrast of the tension from earlier was stark. It was a reminder that understanding and empathy could transform even the most strained situations. The man shared moments of regret, acknowledging mistakes without defensiveness. She listened, validating his feelings without minimizing them. The exchange was balanced, each speaking and listening in turn. They both realized that mutual respect and understanding were more important than authority, wealth, or status. The waitress reflected on her own life, recognizing that courage often came quietly, in small decisions to act honestly and with integrity. She had not planned for this encounter, yet she had created an environment where trust and openness could flourish. She felt a quiet pride in the impact her presence had on someone she had initially feared. The man, in turn, acknowledged the significance of their interaction. He had entered the restaurant angry, frustrated, and alone, but he was leaving the table with a sense of calm and perspective. He realized that human connection could heal in ways wealth and power could not. Her willingness to speak, to listen, and to engage authentically had reminded him of this truth. The restaurant had returned to its normal rhythm, but their table remained separate in energy. They had created a space that allowed for honest communication, reflection, and empathy. It was a rare and powerful experience, one that both would remember for a long time. The young waitress noticed that her own confidence had grown. She had faced a challenge and responded with courage and authenticity. She had seen the impact of simple, genuine communication and understood the importance of presence and listening. Her perspective on life had shifted slightly, recognizing that small actions could have profound consequences. The man, observing her attentiveness and sincerity, felt respect that went beyond professional courtesy. He recognized that her words and actions carried weight not because of her position, but because of the honesty and humanity behind them. He had learned that connection was not about status, but about understanding and respect. They continued to converse, exploring ideas, emotions, and reflections. Each exchange reinforced the bond forming between them. The experience was quiet yet intense, a shared understanding that bridged the gap between two very different lives. By the end of the evening, both had discovered a deeper appreciation for empathy, honesty, and human connection. The waitress realized the value of her presence and her ability to impact others positively. The man understood that vulnerability and openness could bring relief and trust in ways he had long forgotten. They both knew the encounter was special. It had begun with tension and anger, yet through patience, understanding, and communication, it had evolved into a meaningful exchange. Neither could predict the future, but both understood that this night had left a lasting impression. As they prepared to leave, the man looked at the waitress and spoke with quiet appreciation. She smiled, recognizing sincerity in his words. They had both been changed, their perspectives subtly but meaningfully altered. The power of empathy, understanding, and human connection had been demonstrated in the most unexpected place, a restaurant, a simple table, a single conversation. The moment lingered, unspoken but felt. Each knew that life would continue. Challenges would arise and paths might diverge. Yet the memory of this night, the trust and understanding formed, would remain. It was a reminder that human connection, even brief and unexpected, could have profound effects on hearts and minds alike. The man finally stood, stretching slightly as if preparing to leave, yet something had changed in his demeanor. The tension from earlier had vanished completely. His anger, frustration, and impatience had been replaced with a calm he had not felt in months. He looked at the young waitress, his eyes holding a quiet gratitude. She met his gaze, her heart still racing from the intensity of the evening. He reached for his wallet and placed a generous tip on the table, but it was not the money that mattered. The gesture symbolized respect, recognition, and acknowledgement of her understanding and kindness. Yet, even as he prepared to leave, he paused, as if reconsidering something. His hand lingered on the chair, and his eyes scanned the room thoughtfully. The waitress sensed the pause. She wondered what could come next. She had been through many shifts, many encounters, but tonight was different. She had learned that one moment, one decision, could ripple far beyond expectation. Her heart beat faster, anticipating what he might do. He cleared his throat softly, speaking in Arabic, his voice low but steady. He thanked her, not just for her service, but for listening, understanding, and treating him as a person rather than a title or a wealthy customer. His words carried genuine emotion, a rare openness that he had seldom shown to anyone. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, realizing that he was expressing something deeper than gratitude. He then spoke about opportunities, not in terms of jobs or favors, but in terms of mentorship, guidance, and support. He offered to help her in ways that could shape her future, not out of charity, but out of respect for her courage, empathy, and intelligence. She listened, astonished, recognizing that this moment could change the course of her life. Her hands trembled slightly as she responded, careful to express her gratitude without seeming greedy or presumptuous. She did not expect this. No one had ever offered her such an opportunity simply because she had been honest, kind, and present. She realized that the world sometimes rewarded authenticity in ways money or status could not guarantee. The man smiled faintly, understanding her hesitation. He reassured her that his offer came from respect, not obligation, and that he wanted to see her succeed on her own terms. His words were simple, yet they carried weight, offering hope and possibility. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, knowing that her life might take a new direction from this unexpected encounter. He spoke briefly about his own experiences, sharing lessons he had learned from mentors, colleagues, and life itself. He emphasized the importance of integrity, courage, and empathy, qualities he had seen in her that evening. His voice carried sincerity, not lectures or instructions, and she listened with full attention, absorbing every word. The waitress realized that this interaction had transformed both of them. She had provided comfort, understanding, and recognition, and in return, he had offered opportunity, guidance, and respect. The exchange had been mutual, balanced, and meaningful. It had begun with tension and misunderstanding, but evolved into a moment of profound human connection. The man glanced around the restaurant one last time. He noticed the staff, the diners, and the soft ambience. Yet his focus returned to her. He spoke briefly about the importance of recognizing people beyond appearances, wealth, and status. He emphasized that true connection often came from small, sincere actions, speaking, listening, and acknowledging humanity. She nodded, absorbing the lesson not just from his words, but from his actions throughout the evening. The sincerity and authenticity had made a lasting impression. She felt a sense of purpose, understanding that her actions, even small ones, could create meaningful change in the lives of others. He adjusted his coat and prepared to leave, but before walking to the door, he turned once more to her. He offered a simple handshake, firm and respectful. In that gesture, she felt a mixture of closure and possibility, a recognition of the moment shared and the path ahead. She accepted it, feeling the weight and significance of the exchange. As he walked toward the door, the atmosphere around the table shifted. Other diners and staff sensed the end of a unique encounter. The room returned to its normal rhythm. But the energy of the evening lingered. The waitress felt a quiet pride and reflection. She had experienced something rare and transformative, something that reaffirmed the value of empathy, courage, and presence. The man paused briefly outside, looking back at the restaurant. He felt a lightness he had not known in a long time. The anger, stress, and frustration that weighed on him were replaced by a sense of calm and connection. He realized that wealth, power, and success were meaningless without moments of genuine human interaction. One evening, one conversation, one person's understanding had reminded him of the true value of life. He left the restaurant quietly, stepping into the night with a sense of clarity. His mind reflected on the young waitress, her courage, her honesty, and her ability to see beyond status and wealth. He understood that this encounter would stay with him, a reminder of the importance of empathy, connection, and respect. Inside, the waitress returned to her duties, but her perspective had shifted. She felt empowered, inspired, and recognized. The simple act of speaking, listening, and acknowledging humanity had created an unexpected impact, changing not only the man's evening, but also her own sense of possibility. She thought about the lessons she had learned, that courage and authenticity matter, that empathy can bridge gaps, and that even small actions can create profound change. She realized that life often presents unexpected opportunities when one acts with honesty, kindness, and integrity. Later, she would reflect on the evening repeatedly, understanding how one moment could ripple through life. She recognized that this interaction had shown her the power of human connection in a world often dominated by status, money, and appearances. She felt gratitude for the experience and for the lessons it had imparted. The man, walking through the quiet streets, felt similarly. He understood that he had been given a gift, not material, but emotional and human. The experience reminded him that respect, understanding, and authentic communication were far more valuable than anything else he possessed. He resolved to carry this awareness into future interactions, recognizing that wealth alone could not bring fulfillment. Days later, the waitress would receive a message, a small follow-up from the man offering encouragement and advice. She felt a mixture of excitement and humility, knowing that this connection, brief as it had been, had lasting significance. She understood that life could change in unexpected ways when people acted with empathy, courage, and authenticity. The man, in his own world of business and responsibility, reflected on the encounter often. He remembered the moment she had spoken his language, the genuine understanding she offered, and the calm that it replaces anger. He realized that the evening had reminded him of the human side of life, a side he had rarely allowed himself to embrace fully. Both of them had been changed by the experience. She had gained confidence and perspective. He had found a rare sense of calm and human connection. They understood that life's most meaningful moments often came from simple acts of honesty, empathy, and respect. The restaurant continued its rhythm, hosting other diners and stories, yet the memory of that evening remained with both the waitress and the billionaire. It was a reminder that life's challenges, frustrations, and burdens could be eased through understanding, presence, and the courage to connect authentically. In the end, what began as tension and misunderstanding had transformed into a moment of life-changing connection. Two lives, so different yet intertwined by circumstance and choice, had discovered profound impact of empathy and honesty. The evening ended, but its lessons would resonate forever. Respect, understanding, and genuine human connection could change hearts, inspire hope, and create opportunities that money alone could never buy.